Confucius was a philosophical teacher who lived from 551 to 479 BCE. He was also called Master Kong or Kongzi. He was a teacher who had a very distinctive educational philosophy. Although he lived during the times of ancient China, his principles are still taught all over the world today. Confucius established one of the first ever private schools. He wanted to give access to education to all types of people. Therefore, he started his own school and asked for a low tuition from the students who attended. This was the first time education was available to those who were not of the aristocrats. Confucius had many beliefs and sayings that are descriptive of mankind. One of the most interesting thoughts of his was that it is easier to find someone comparable in moral standing than someone equally fond of learning. This means he thought it was easier to find another person who agreed with his values but did not necessarily share his love of education or of learning. Confucius' main theory of philosophical education was to teach his students to live with integrity. He believed in traditional values, propriety, and rituals of society, specifically Chinese society. The aim of education, according to Confucius, was to instruct Ren, which is humanity, through life, which is normative behaviors, so that learners can realize and broaden Dao, which is their way. This, broken down, meant that education was intended to teach values of kindness and benevolence, which were demonstrated in daily life in order to create a way of life. The main focus of education in Confucianism is if a ruler desires to transform the people and perfect their customs, the ruler can only do so through education. This means for any society to progress and perfect their way of living, rulers have to educate their subjects. The ruler, according to Confucius, should devote their time and attention to teaching their people. The reference to transformation and perfection in the main verse signifies that the scope is extensive, going beyond skills training and cognitive advancement to paradigm shift and character development. The actualization of this aim of education naturally requires a normative standard to guide the ruler in knowing whether and when the people have been transformed and their customs perfected. Some of Confucius' most famous sayings are as follows. The strength of a nation derives from the integrity of the home. The man who says he can and the man who says he cannot are both correct. Your life is what your thoughts make it. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. The man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who does not ask is a fool for life. The journey with 1,000 miles begins with one step. Choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. Looking at small advantages prevents great affairs from being accomplished. All people are the same, only their habits differ. And finally, learn avidly, question it repeatedly, analyze it carefully, then put what you have learned into practice intelligently. There are some critiques of the way of Confucianism. The first is the interpretation. In years following his teachings, the idea of Ren was considered specific moral attributes, where in actuality, based on the scholars Confucius followed, it should be considered a dynamic process. Another critique is that the theory was centered around the society that existed at the time Confucius was an influential teacher. This means it involves hierarchies and things not as common today. Confucius taught many values that are still relevant today. I think there are many lessons we can learn from his words and philosophical ideas. Mainly, it is important to live with integrity, always try your best, be kind, and be hardworking. I think even though There are some issues with the basis of the society in which Confucianism was created. It can be adapted to fit today's society's needs and is therefore timeless.